Welcome back to our channel, where we bring you the most thrilling, heart-stopping, and exclusive update from the glamorous and cutthroat world of your favorite daytime dramas. Today is a magnificent day to dive deep into the explosive corporate warfare and passionate romances that are completely reshaping the Los Angeles fashion industry. Grab your favorite beverage, settle into a comfortable spot, and let us unpack the monumental shifts and shocking betrayals happening right now. The atmosphere inside the executive boardroom of Forrester Creations was already thick with an unbearable, suffocating tension that seemed to seep into the very walls of the building. The grand mahogany table, historically a symbol of family unity, creative triumph, and unparalleled fashion dominance, had recently been transformed into a bitter battlefield of massive egos and ruthless power plays. Ridge Forrester sat at the head of the table, his brow deeply furrowed with the immense, crushing weight of keeping his family empire from fracturing entirely under the pressure of recent events. Steffy Forrester Finnegan, exuding an aura of unyielding authority and defensive pride, occupied the seat beside him, her posture rigid and her gaze sharp enough to cut through glass. The recent corporate chaos, including the bitter, highly publicized disputes over the co-CEO position with Logan Forrester and the relentless, calculated sabotage of the Hope for the Future line, had transformed the once vibrant fashion house into a dark fortress of suspicion. Every shadow in the building seemed to harbor a secret, and the air crackled with a toxic paranoia that was slowly but surely suffocating the creative spirit of its most talented designers. Into this den of corporate hostility and simmering resentment walked Electra Forrester, carrying an invisible burden that had finally become far too heavy for her to bear. For months, she had poured her entire soul, her passion, and her waking hours into the Forrester jewelry line, bravely stepping up to the plate when Ivy Forrester stepped away and single-handedly keeping the dazzling, intricate collections afloat. Yet, despite her undeniable talent, her bloodline, and her relentless dedication to the company's success, Electra found herself constantly caught in the devastating crossfire of Steffy's increasingly dictatorial regime. The young designer's heart, usually so full of vibrant passion for her artistic craft, had been steadily and painfully worn down by the constant demands for blind loyalty and the overarching, oppressive atmosphere of distrust that now defined the executive suite. As she stood at the threshold of the boardroom, her eyes locked onto the faces of her family members, realizing with a heavy heart that the blood running through their veins was no longer enough to bind them together in this deeply toxic environment. Electra's internal conflict had been brewing for quite some time, a silent, agonizing storm raging beneath her composed and professional exterior. On one hand, she carried the proud, historic legacy of the Forrester name, a heritage built on decades of glamour, groundbreaking innovation, and an unwavering commitment to high fashion excellence established by Eric Forrester. On the other hand, her heart unequivocally belonged to Will Spencer, a man who represented everything the Forrester executives currently despised and actively plotted against. The recent, emotionally charged summer soiree at the reopened Bikini Bar, where Will had publicly, vulnerably, and passionately begged for her to get back together, had awakened a fierce, undeniable truth within her soul. She loved Will Spencer with every fiber of her being, and she could no longer pretend that her family's petty vendettas, corporate paranoia, and endless grudges were more important than her own personal happiness. The recent, vicious demands from a jealous R.J. Forrester, who had marched into this very office to demand that Ridge and Steffy terminate Will from the company orbit entirely, had served as the final, unforgivable catalyst for her breaking point. As Electra approached the massive, polished table, the silence in the room became absolutely deafening, the kind of quiet that precedes a devastating earthquake. Steffy looked up from her documents, her expression a complex mix of impatience and condescension, fully expecting another subordinate family member to fall in line with her draconian mandates and strict corporate directives. Instead, She was met with a gaze of pure, unadulterated defiance from the young jewelry designer. Electra did not mince her words, nor did she cower under the weight of the co-CEO's intimidating glare. Her voice, though trembling slightly with the sheer magnitude and emotional weight of her impending decision, rang out clear, strong, and authoritative across the expansive room. She meticulously articulated the deep-seated exhaustion she felt, painting a vivid, undeniable picture of a workplace that had tragically devolved from a sanctuary of collaborative art into a rigid prison of paranoia and fear. Electra bravely called out the dictatorial nature of the current leadership, explicitly pointing to the suffocating environment that made it entirely impossible for true creativity and joy to thrive within those walls. She highlighted the sheer hypocrisy of a family business that treated its own members like potential spies and traitors, referencing the ridiculous security crackdowns and the constant, draining loyalty tests. Then came the moment that would forever be etched into the dramatic annals of Forrester Creations' history, a moment of pure rebellion that no one in that room could have ever anticipated. With a swift, deliberate, and fiercely dramatic motion, Electra reached into her sleek portfolio and pulled out a crisp, white envelope. She did not slide it gently across the polished wood. She did not hand it over with a polite, apologetic murmur. She threw it. The resignation letter left her hand and landed with a sharp, echoing slap right in the dead center of the CEO desk, serving as a physical, undeniable manifestation of her shattered loyalty and her absolute refusal to participate in their games any longer. The sound of the paper hitting the wood seemed to reverberate off the walls, instantly freezing the air in the room and stopping time itself. Steffy's eyes widened in absolute, unadulterated shock, her carefully constructed mask of icy control slipping completely for a fraction of a second as she stared at the document. Ridge physically recoiled in his leather chair, the color rapidly draining from his handsome face as the devastating reality of the resignation letter sitting before him began to fully register in his mind. This was not a negotiation. This was a definitive, explosive exit. Steffy, fiercely prideful and relentlessly protective of her corporate domain, was naturally the first to find her voice amidst the heavy silence. She quickly attempted to mask her profound astonishment with a thick veil of defensive indignation, slamming her hands on the table and demanding to know what on earth Electra thought she was doing. How could she turn her back on her own blood? How could she recklessly abandon the prestigious jewelry line that bore her family's legendary name? But Steffy's sharp words, usually so effective at cutting down opposition and forcing compliance, bounced harmlessly off Electra's newfound, impenetrable armor of self-worth. Electra calmly, yet resolutely, explained that she could no longer sacrifice her precious mental health, her artistic integrity, and her personal joy for a regime that valued blind obedience over actual innovation. She explicitly and fearlessly condemned the environment of suspicion, making it crystal clear that Steffy's iron-fisted rule was not a sign of corporate strength, but rather a fatal, glaring weakness that was actively driving away the very talent that kept the company alive and relevant. Ridge, caught once again in the devastating, heartbreaking crossfire of yet another massive family fracture, desperately tried to intervene and salvage the rapidly deteriorating situation. He rose slowly from his executive chair, his voice cracking with a poignant mixture of CEO authority and profound, desperate paternal pleading. He had already endured the agonizing, highly publicized loss of Hope Logan Spencer to the rival Logan Fashion House, a bitter blow that had left him deeply concerned about the impending public relations nightmare and the shifting balance of power in the industry. Now, facing the catastrophic departure of his own flesh and blood, another brilliant creative mind walking out the door, Ridge actively begged Electra to reconsider her drastic actions. He implored her to think about the long-standing legacy, to remember the beautiful foundation built by her grandfather Eric Forrester, and to find a way to work through the internal strife as a united family. He promised immediate changes, he promised professional mediation, and he promised to shield her from the corporate crossfire. But his desperate promises rang entirely hollow in the face of the systemic toxicity that had so firmly taken root in the building. Electra looked at Ridge, her soft eyes briefly filling with a fleeting moment of genuine sorrow for the patriarch who was so clearly losing control of his once mighty empire. But her inner resolve remained entirely unbroken and absolute. She told him, with a voice full of quiet strength, that her decision was not born out of malice, spite, or a desire for revenge, but out of a desperate, vital need for self-preservation and authentic, unconditional love. She proudly and loudly declared that she was following the undeniable call of her heart, actively choosing a life where she could be supported, cherished, and inspired rather than constantly surveilled, judged, and controlled. Then she delivered the final, most devastating blow of all. She announced, with a crystal clarity that sent cold shivers down Ridge's spine, that she was officially joining the Logan fashion house. She was going to stand proudly by Will Spencer, aligning herself completely with the man she loved and the rival family that was currently offering a beautiful beacon of creative freedom, genuine appreciation, and massive forward momentum. The shocking declaration hung in the air like a heavy, suffocating fog, leaving Ridge and Steffy entirely speechless. This was not just the unfortunate loss of a brilliant, highly capable jewelry designer. It was a devastating, agonizing, and deeply humiliating slap to the pride of the entire Forrester dynasty. For decades, Forrester Creations had confidently viewed itself as the undisputed, untouchable pinnacle of the Los Angeles fashion world, an elite fortress of talent that no rival could ever truly threaten or dismantle. But Electra's bold defection shattered that grand illusion completely and irreparably. She was taking her visionary design skills, her intimate insider knowledge of the company's inner workings, and, most importantly, the highly prestigious Forrester name, directly to their fiercest, most energized competitors. It was a monumental, historic betrayal in the strict eyes of Steffy and Ridge, a massive shift in corporate power that they were entirely unprepared to handle or counter. Turning her back on the stunned, silent executives, Electra walked out of the boardroom with her head held high, without casting a single backward glance at the empire she was leaving behind. The heavy, ornate wooden doors clicked shut behind her, officially finalizing the severance of her professional ties to her family. As she walked down the opulent, carpeted corridors of the executive suite, a profound, overwhelming sense of liberation and joy washed over her entire being. The invisible, crushing weights that had been anchoring her to the floor for months seemed to vanish into thin air, replaced by an exhilarating, buoyant lightness. She confidently stepped into the glass elevator, the smooth, rapid descent perfectly mirroring her transition from the high-stress, toxic atmosphere of her past into the promising, boundless, and loving potential of her future. She was leaving behind the dark shadows of paranoia and stepping boldly into the bright, welcoming light of a brand new beginning. Down in the grand, expansive, marble-floored lobby of the Forrester building, a scene of unprecedented, jaw-dropping corporate audacity was currently unfolding for all to see. Bill Spencer, the formidable, ruthless patriarch of the Spencer publishing and corporate empire, stood waiting near the entrance with an aura of supreme, unshakable confidence that commanded the attention of everyone in the room. Dressed in a sharply tailored, expensive suit that practically screamed wealth and power, Dollar Bill looked every inch the conquering, victorious king surveying his newly acquired territory. He had not sent a low-level proxy to fetch her, nor had he passively waited for Electra to arrive at the Logan offices across town. He had boldly come directly into the very belly of the beast, standing proudly on Forrester soil to personally, publicly escort their latest, most devastating acquisition out of the building. His imposing presence in the lobby was a highly calculated, brilliant psychological strike, a vivid visual representation of his absolute, undeniable triumph over Ridge and Steffi. As the elevator doors slid open with a soft chime and Electra emerged into the lobby, Bill's signature, slightly smug smirk widened into a genuine, incredibly victorious smile. He stepped forward with purpose, extending a strong hand of professional partnership and fierce familial protection, enveloping the young designer in a warm, highly authoritative welcome that was meant to be seen by the security guards and passing employees. He loudly praised her courage, openly validating her difficult decision to break free from the suffocating, restrictive chains of the Forrester regime. For Electra, seeing Bill Spencer standing there, waiting specifically for her, was a powerful, deeply emotional affirmation of her brave choice. He represented the immense strength, the vast resources, and the unwavering, fierce support of the newly forged Spencer and Logan alliance, a stark, beautiful contrast to the highly conditional love and relentless, draining demand she had just left behind in the boardroom upstairs. Together, arm in arm, they walked out of the grand glass doors, leaving the fractured Forrester legacy in their wake. This monumental, highly publicized departure marked the definitive, undeniable dawn of a brand new, highly competitive era in the Los Angeles fashion industry. The Logan Fashion House, operating under the aggressive, highly motivated, and visionary leadership of Katie Logan Spencer, was no longer just a struggling, secondary competitor trying desperately to find its footing in a crowded market. It had rapidly transformed into an irresistible, powerful magnet for the industry's most brilliant and sought-after minds. By successfully poaching the visionary Hope Logan Spencer, securing the edgy talents of Deke Sharp, and now remarkably, shockingly pulling Electra Forrester into their growing ranks, Logan was actively, systematically draining Forrester Creations of its core, foundational talent. They were building a massive, unstoppable empire not just on fresh, innovative ideas, but on the very individuals who had previously made Forrester the untouchable, legendary juggernaut it once was. Back up in the silent, tense executive suite, the harsh reality of the situation was sending massive shockwaves of absolute panic through the remaining leadership. The personnel crisis was immediate, glaring, and entirely catastrophic. Who on earth would take over the intricate jewelry line on such short notice? How could they possibly replace a generational talent that carried the family name and understood the brand's DNA so intimately? But the internal logistical chaos paled in comparison to the impending, terrifying public relations nightmare that was about to unfold. Ridge paced the length of the boardroom floor, his mind racing with the disastrous, sensationalized headlines that were absolutely sure to follow in the morning papers. The fashion press and the tabloids would have an absolute field day with the juicy narrative of a young Forrester fleeing the prestigious family business to join their bitter, rising rivals simply for love and basic creative freedom. The dictatorial, oppressive atmosphere Steffi had so carefully cultivated and fiercely defended was now completely exposed to the world as a fatal, company-destroying flaw, pushing Forrester Creations into a state of frantic, desperate, and highly reactive damage control. Meanwhile, as Electra rode away from the towering, imposing Forrester building in the back of Bill Spencer's sleek town car, her thoughts shifted entirely and joyfully to Will Spencer. The bitter corporate warfare, the shocked, angry faces of her family members, the looming, inevitable media circus, all of it quickly faded into the background of her mind. She had made the ultimate, incredibly brave sacrifice for him, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that her deep love was far stronger than any outdated familial obligation or forced corporate loyalty. Their impending reunion at the bustling Logan offices would not just be a standard professional onboarding. It would be a passionate, deeply emotional, and highly celebrated validation of their unbreakable bond. Will's heartfelt, desperate pleas at the bikini bar had not been in vain. He had successfully won back the brilliant woman of his dreams, and together, surrounded by a supportive team, they were perfectly poised to become